Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Cradle Podcast's first show of 2026. This is going to be an exciting year.
It is already.
Good or bad, it's going to be exciting. Before we start, let me just remind everyone to, oops, I already messed up. Hold on, let me put this on mute. Make sure to hit that like button in honor of our good friend Esteban Carrillo, who is taking New Year's Day off. And make sure to follow us on Twitter, Telegram, Rumble, Instagram, and
TikTok.
TikTok. And of course, become a Patreon if you haven't already. We are rushing towards a deadline where we need 1,000 Patreons by, I think it's January 24th, and we're somewhere around 350 now. So let's go. This year, other than following the news, the Cradle is going to really up its visual media and bring people, deep dives into subjects that are not being, I think, really looked at elsewhere. We're going to bring interview shows. I know a number of y'all have been asking for that for a long time. We're always going to try to bring you voices maybe that you haven't heard before. One of the things that the Cradle wanted to do when it started was to sort of grow a stable of writers and experts that one doesn't normally have access to. Not the same people who sort of go on the circuit, but new voices and to sort of like Mohammed Soidan, for instance, a very, very important voice here in Lebanon, who covers the region and global geopolitics. So I think we've done that in our 4 years. We've really helped bring up a whole new generation of writers. But I think the interview show, visual media is what everyone's into these days. Interview show will ratchet that up significantly. We're also going to ask you, you'll know about our Christmas merch, right? Our 4 new designs on t-shirts, hoodies, and mugs. But they were so popular, 2 of them in particular. We're going to ask you folks to weigh in and tell us which one of these 4 designs you'd like us to keep beyond the new year. Okay, because New Year was the deadline. It's when our merch will be taken offline. But because of the popularity of, in particular, 2 of our designs, we're going to ask you to choose. We're not going to tell you which ones those are. Karim will put up the pictures on this podcast, I think once or twice, to let you choose. And then we will let you know in our next podcast which one made the cut. Okay, this is going to be a very, very busy show in that we are going to try to make some predictions for 2026. And that's always hard because we always say here at the Cradle, you can see the direction of things if you're looking carefully, but one singular event can throw off that trajectory. And we see that often in this region. So our predictions are to be taken as if everything was chugging along as they are now, with all the players in their places and no surprises, like the awful pager attack, So, of course, there will be surprises. Okay, we're not saying there won't be. So I think with that, let's talk about what is hot this week and why this is going to continue into 2026. And I think top on everyone's mind, it's what we were all busy looking at this last week or so, is maybe the UAE Saudi Arabia standoff that's now burst into the open. I mean, these 2 countries have always had their own rivalries, okay? They by and large, they were friendly rivalries, okay? Who's going to be the economically dominant power in the Gulf? Who's going to be geopolitically dominant? Who's going to, take the mantle on whatever the issue is of the day? And so that rivalry has always been there before the scene. These 2, as in most GCC countries, have tended to manage these rivalries when they start to get a little bit hostile behind the scenes. Okay, but this is The first time in a very long time that we're seeing it spill out into the open. Mohammed, do you think we're going to see more of this spilling out into the open, or are they going to nip it in the bud and take all their arguments behind the scenes? What do you think?
To be honest, no, I really think that things will escalate between the two countries, and by escalation, I don't mean necessarily military escalation, but this competition won't end very soon because for several reasons. Number one, for Saudi Arabia, it's one thing to have a competitive country outside the GCC, the Gulf countries, but it's very dangerous to have a competitor inside the GCC, mainly because when you're inside the GCC, it means this country is competing with you inside your own house, inside the place you believe that you control. So that's why Saudi Arabia views UAE today much more dangerous than any other competitor in the region. Number two, because of the increasing relation between UAE and Israel, and because there is a huge vacuum in the region today, and UAE and Israel are trying to fill this vacuum, meaning that whenever UAE is increasing its influence inside the GCC or outside it, this means Israel is increasing its influence inside the GCC or outside it. That's why the threat that Saudi Arabia is going to feel is not, it's just increasing throughout time. It's just moving towards more feeling threatened by UAE, and mainly because UAE doesn't only represent itself, it represents itself and it represents an axis along with Israel. That's why I think that, yes, Saudi Arabia will feel more threatened as time passes. And that's why this escalation or this tension will continue to increase between the two countries.
Do you think it'll happen in the open, though? I mean, let's say, for instance, we have the OPEC Plus meeting at the end of this week. Is it the end of this week? I
Yeah, I
can't
think.
remember. Is this tension going to play out there? Because, the the UAE wants to produce more, right? It wants to raise production. The Saudis don't want that because they want to keep the price at a decent level to deal with their domestic economic demands. Are we going to see that play out as soon as just this upcoming OPEC Plus meeting? Or will they do what they've done before, just handle it behind closed doors? I mean, what you're saying is largely correct, but we can't also forget that the way the GCC went prior to this, okay, and broke its own house when they went after Qatar and to besiege Qatar, right?
I think that it's not. What I'm speaking about is a trend. It's not something that we're going to see today or tomorrow. It's a trend. The trend in the next couple of months is a competitive trend between all the regional powers, and today especially between KSA and UAE. So this is the trend in the next couple of months. When we will see this trend reach its maximum, well, there are many factors that affect this, but as long as there's, let's all be clear about something. What happened in the last 2 years created a vacuum in the region. This vacuum was mainly created because of, the decline or some kind of decline of Iran's role in the region because of what happened during these 2 years. This decline led to a huge vacuum that many countries are trying to fill. And on the top of the list is Israel. At the beginning, Saudi Arabia viewed this as a positive thing because they only wanted to get rid of Iran. But then as time passed, I think now they are more convinced that, if getting rid of Iran means opening the doors for Israel, then no, because Israel is a much greater threat. All this change of perception will lead to the tension to stay increasing in the next couple of months. That's why I think that the increasing of tension between UAE and KSA is a trend in the next couple of months. It will reach a time when it will be much more clear in the region.
I mean, I agree with you in that the UAE and everyone's dropping their masks now, right?
Yeah.
This is a thing. And it's happening because of de-dollarization, deglobalization, the diminishment of American power projection. and the shift in the global economy eastward, and so everybody is dropping their masks, because they're all rushing out to grab at the brass ring. And so I agree with you in that sense. I mean, had it been 10 years ago, I don't think this rivalry would have played out in public, other than like this kind of strong slap that the Saudis gave the Emiratis and vice versa. But I think now it's too late. Everybody has to grab the brass ring, otherwise they think they're going to be cut out of the great developments, new developments of the 21st century. But yeah, Karim, do you think it's going to play out in public? Or are they going to, are the Americans and others going to step in to try to make this go away so they look unified?
Yeah, I fully agree with Dr. Muhammad regarding what he said. And I think it will be a trend also because if you remember in 2017 and 18, not so long ago when Saudi Arabia besieged Qatar, they besieged them like for 1.5 years, 2 years, and now everything is back to normal as if they are the same country. So we might see also, like in the near future, pictures with Mohammed bin Zayed and Mohammed bin Salman as if nothing happened. Now, this is the problem in the region. These guys, they play, and so unfortunately, innocents die, and they will create like vacuums that will never heal in our region, and they don't care. And of course, the United States will not allow two of its biggest donors in the region, we can say, not only allies, to fight against each other. That's my opinion.
Yeah, I don't know. I think they will try to mend some things behind the scenes, but I agree with Mohammed in the sense that the rivalry is so existential in the minds of the leaders of these two countries. And, I can try to break down why. So West Asia is undergoing a structural transformation in its regional conflict. So moved away from ideological fights to and maybe even the axes, right? The resistance axis versus the moderate Arabs. Those typical fights are no longer what the fights are about in 2026 and weren't in 2025 either. This structural transformation in the kind of regional conflicts we're going to see there is going to become very apparent this year. I think, the fights are shifting towards control of economic geography. Particularly the land routes, sea corridors, energy corridors, connectivity. For these two countries, all right, but many also in the region, these connectivity projects that they're hyper-focused on are the ones linking the Persian Gulf to the Mediterranean Sea. And, in some ways, all of this was kicked off by China's BRI, right? Nobody was looking at major national or continental projects. Nobody was doing that. We'd become finance capitalism, right? The world. It was all about big companies exchanging money to boost their quarterly earnings. And then China came along with its Belt and Road Initiative to build out Asia and connect it ultimately to Europe, which is, and Africa. And then, it took a few years and people started to open their eyes. Okay, wait a second. Our prominence in this century, meaning regional actors, our prominence in this century is no longer going to be determined by how much oil we sell. That was how it worked before. How much money can you make from how much oil you sell? All these countries are looking for diversification because they have finite resources. That discussion has been on the table for a long time, but what they realized is who controls the routes is going to determine who dominates the region from the Persian Gulf through the Levant to the Mediterranean Sea. So I almost want to say in 2026, don't look, no matter if the UAE says, no, we're going in there because of the Muslim Brotherhood. It's absolutely BS these ideological battles are just a cover for what is really happening. The UAE is going to the Horn in Africa not because of the Muslim Brotherhood. Okay, it's going into, or in Yemen because of the Muslim Brotherhood. It is going in there because of control of corridors, control of routes, and in the UAE's case in particular, control of ports. Would you agree, Mohammed, more or less, that the old clashes of the past, the old rivalries of the past, are being displaced very quickly by these new, very economic-based hostilities?
Yeah, I think that the economic factor is one of the most important factors, but in certain places it's still ideological. It's no more the main factor. But let us give an example here. For example, inside of Gaza, Egypt feels very threatened by Turkey playing a role there because Turkey supports Muslim Brotherhood inside of Gaza. So the Egyptians feel that if Turkey is there, then we will have a Muslim Brotherhood country on our borders. So there are some places that ideology may still play a certain factor, but it's not the main factor driving conflicts in the region anymore. Now it's
Yeah.
economic and political factors. For example, what's happening in Africa is mainly for economic reasons, resources, and economic corridors. And part of what's happening in Gaza is also about economic reasons. And parts of what's happening in Lebanon is security and economic reasons. So, yes, it's mainly economics and security. But in some places, ideology may be a factor affecting conflicts. And let's all remember that today UAE is coordinates with groups inside several countries in the region, inside of Libya, Sudan, Yemen, and in several countries. And I think more than or most of them isn't driven by any ideological factor, but only economic, political ones.
I mean, the Egyptians more or less coexisted with Hamas, which is ultimately aligned with the Muslim Brotherhood. They existed with Hamas being the dominant political power in Gaza for many years. I think, for instance, the reason they would be so alarmed at Turkey getting a foothold in there, and Turkey's being rather insistent on playing a physical role in Gaza in sort of the post-ceasefire era. Turkey's interest in doing that is not because it wants the Gaza problem. It's because it is very threatened by the Israeli, Cypriot, Greek new play in the Eastern Mediterranean to basically elbow out Turkey, right, from that route and to take over and take control of it itself, right? And so again, I think it is all about these corridors and routes. By the way, have any of y'all heard Arabs on social media calling out an Arab country as harshly as they have been doing to the UAE in the last week? Have you ever heard this before? I'm trying to think.
No, since what happened in Sudan like 2 3 months ago, so in the Arab social media, everybody is calling out the UAE 100%.
Yeah, but
Not all.
it's become ferocious. I mean, the Saudis are saying things, Saudi citizens, right? But even officials have been saying things that you can't pull back from very easily. Do you know what I mean?
Well, they do, Sharmin.
They do. But okay, Mohammed, have
They
you
did.
heard this
They,
level
they
of
did.
harshness?
Yes, I think we heard a much higher level when the problem was with Qatar too, because
Yeah.
it's always that you hear the highest voices and the harshest words when the fight is inside the GCC house, because that's the place where the competition is inside your house. You know, it's not with an outside actor, but it's inside the same house. That's why you hear very harsh voices. So I think the Saudis previously used the same harsh words with the Qatar, and today they're using the same harsh words with the UAE.
Yeah, in Qatar they went to places, Saudi Arabia. يعني. I remember they made like an alternative for Al Jazeera Sport and alternative for BBN, and they opened everything. The Qatar asks for money because Qatar is a very big media hub in the Arab world, and I think also worldwide, and everybody knows Al Jazeera and their media. So what Saudi Arabia did, they everything that Qatar broadcasts and is paid, they open it for free to the Arab world. So
Okay, but in this case, I mean, surely y'all are noticing it's not just GCC countries that are going after the UAE. It's throughout the Arab world. I mean, everybody's dumping on the Emirates now. It's like their eyes were suddenly open to the Emirates. You know, maybe it's
Except
because
for Israel.
the Sudan situation with the RSF and the support, basically UAE support of absolute butchers, you know, just preceded what's, you know, the UAE's territorial grab in Yemen through their proxies, the STC, the Southern Transitional Council, and then, you know, I mean, that's the thing. Like, you know, the Qatar thing was an inter-GCC issue and rivalry, but I feel from every corner of the Arab world now, you're hearing enormous censure against the UAE. For me,
just
that's-
speaking of the UAE, I just want to read this news that came out yesterday from Hebrew websites, especially from Walla. The Emirates Airlines has decided to establish a constant air route between Abu Dhabi and Tel Aviv with 6 flights per day, starting from June 15, reaching 42 flights per week.
Yeah. No, but this is another
much.
element of it. I think everyone's seeing that the UAE is completely Israel. You know, they are
It's
these.
too much.
It's beyond. They're the only Arab country that did not call out Israel's recognition of Somaliland, because Somaliland is part of an Emirati project as well.
And Bahrain.
Yeah. You know how like years ago we realized that the Turks and the Qataris were working hand in hand on like all these projects? This is what we're seeing, that the Emiratis are working hand in hand with the Israelis on all the projects.
So let me ask you and Muhammad the same question, but because I always think about it, and previously that's what I like understood from the region, is that we had like the Iranian axis, including Syria and Hezbollah and some faction in Iraq, and also they support also the Yemenis Ansarullah. So I thought this is like one axis, and then we have the Muslim Brotherhood axis, which the main players are Qatar and the Turks and Turkey. And I thought there's like the moderate Arab axis, which was named from the United States. They call themselves the moderate Arab, which includes the Gulf countries and Jordan and Morocco and Egypt. But now what I'm saying, you know, there is a division now after, as I said, after the weakening of Iran. We're seeing a divide within the same axis, which is the Saudi Emirati axis, the axis that, for instance, launched the war in Yemen and also supported Egypt economically, and they used to boycott, for instance, Turkey together and Qatar together. So now that's what we are saying. So I'm just wondering, was this the case from the beginning, or no, this happened following October 7?
Listen, I think I've called this out before in my writings since the Arab Spring started, that actually, you know, they're making it out like there's the revolutions, right? The Arab Spring revolutions. And then within a year, we started to see the counter revolutions, meaning the monarchies, heavily funding, arming with their Western allies, their NATO allies, counter revolutions targeting adversarial states. Okay, so these were, you know, initially they were in Tunisia and Egypt. We started to see people coming to public squares in Jordan and Bahrain. Am I leaving anyone out? And those were very, very dangerous for the U.S. and its regional allies and monarchy, you know, monarchism in general. And suddenly Libya, suddenly Syria, and then suddenly major efforts to bring this to Iran. So those were the counter-revolutions. But while everyone was thinking this is a axes battle now, I was thinking that this is all the leaders of the major Arab countries and Turkey. I mean, Alistair Crook famously wrote, "This is Sunni versus Sunni," meaning a vacuum had been created, new things were shaping up, and so major actors were jumping in, and we're talking about the Emirates, we're talking about Qatar, we're talking about Saudi Arabia, we're talking about Turkey, we're talking about Egypt. We're jumping in to try to grab the opportunity and to shape things to go in their favor. And so the competition was really about who's going to be the next caliph of this region. And the Saudis had always had that position, right? But they weren't as strong as they had been before. They weren't as robust. We were seeing things in Western think tanks about, the Saudi age of dominance is over. They're running out. They hardly have any oil reserves, not much left. And, there's going to be a vacuum. And then the UAE stepped up to fill that vacuum. Nobody was paying attention to the UAE, but you could see this happen. That was when the UAE started building its massive mercenary armies. It's when Eric Prince went in there that the UAE started to buy major military hardware and started to, work on its projects in the Horn of Africa, et cetera. So, and then Erdogan in Turkey with his, his interventions in Sudan, in Libya, with the Arabs and the Emiratis in, sorry, did I say Sudan, Libya, Syria and Libya, and the Emiratis and Saudis in Yemen, they all jumped in to use this opportunity to become the biggest hegemon. That's my view of things. And that is the battle that is continuing. And it's funny, but the axis of resistance is now not really their focus at all. Because they feel it's been sufficiently weakened. And I would add, and Mohammed, you know about this because I think you wrote about this for the Cradle, that actually when the war between the Israelis and Iranians were going on, the Saudis and other in the Gulf were really not happy to see Iran potentially lose. They did not want Israel to win this because they suddenly realized that the Axis had been the one thing standing in the way of overt and aggressive Israeli expansionism in the region, which is what Israel's doing. It's showing its face too, right? So, I mean, I think...
First, I want to say Happy New Year for Golden Sun. And let's hear from Mohammed Swaidan, Dr. Mohammed Swaidan.
I think that in this year we will have four main axes in the region. Axis number one is the Iranian axis along with its allies. Axis number two will be Saudi Arabia and its allies. Axis number three will be Turkey and its allies. Axis number four will be Israel and its allies. And UAE falls under the Israeli axis in the region. So I think these four countries are the main pillars of axes in the regions in the next year. And what changed in the last few weeks before and will continue changing is that the commonalities between the three powers, Iran, Turkey, and Saudi Arabia, are going to increase. The threat perception of these three is going to increase regarding the fourth axis, because at the beginning of 2025, Saudi Arabia thought that it can benefit from the weakening of Iran, and it can benefit from the Israeli strength so that Iran can never return as a power in the region. But then Saudi Arabia discovered that, well, if Israel is a substitute for Iran, then this is something bad. This is not something good. So that's why I think the threat perception of these three main pillars towards Israel will be one of the commonalities. And I think that's what drove Saudi Arabia for a type of lenience inside of Lebanon towards Hezbollah. And I think that's what's convincing Turkey to have a forward posture in the Eastern Mediterranean and in West Asia, because it doesn't want this vacuum to be filled by UAE or Israel, the same axis. And I think that's why Turkey is insisting on a place in Gaza, mainly because Turkey feels that it should be at the table. It should sit at the table. This seat at the table makes it near the United States of America, meaning that it won't let Israel have it's all only the country between brackets that shares the opinion with the United States. So I think these four countries are the main pillars, and these four countries will compete in the region. But it will be the first time in the history of the region where the main countries have a type of mutual perception of threat from Israel.
No, I agree. I mean, I think you actually framed that really, really well, Mohammed. But we can also recognize at the same time that any singular event can suddenly rejig those four alliances, right? So let's say Iran became, I don't know, Iran became aggressive.
So,
The actors on the other side would shift. Or if Israel lost its weight, right? There was a war,
I think these actors learned the lesson, even if Iran became aggressive. This is how I see things. I think Saudi Arabia and Turkey today are thinking that we were living in better days when Iran was strong and Israel was weak. I
yeah,
think
well,
today they
100%.
prefer to return to these days. Yeah, if they are to choose between having Israel as a
100%.
hegemon or Iran as a hegemon, they would prefer Iran.
And I think the Saudis recognizing what a danger the Emiratis are right now, not the Emiratis per se, but Mohammed bin Zayed and his cohorts, that how aggressively he's willing to, how far he's willing to go to grab the helm, right, has really changed their considerations about Israel. You would think that when Mohammed bin Salman went to Washington, there would be some effort by the Americans to show that normalization is actually kind of on the table still, but they just put their hands up. I think they could see that this was just not a go. And for people here in this podcast and elsewhere that were arguing for ages that the Saudis take American instructions, Karim, I'm talking about you, that they do whatever the Americans want.
They do.
I was arguing that no, their interests have changed. And actually, now we're seeing Mohammed bin Salman go back to the old traditionalist Saudi way of leadership, which was very incremental changes. Okay, he made his big changes. Okay, he made a big splash, but he's rolling back the aggressiveness with which he was ruling, right? And making decisions. I think he played this very well. I never thought I'd say this, but Mohammed bin Salman played this very well. He did not cave to the American demand. And he obviously could see what was happening with the Emirates well before the general public could, So I mean, for me, it's kind of surprising mastery, but maybe that's because he's made so many mistakes that he now has, people around him that are suddenly making more sense to him. And he is actually engaging with them, the Saudis want to be out of Yemen as far as I could see. And now when they see what's happening to Yemen, the actual potential division of Yemen back to north and south, it's absolutely terrifying for them. Will we see, for instance, in 2026, the Saudis push for a full resolution of Yemen, no matter what the Americans say, no matter what the Emiratis do? The Saudis do a deal with Ansar Allah and then get, and bring in forces to enforce it in the south. This is because that's right on Saudi's border. Other countries, Somaliland, Djibouti, etc., are not in the same way. But Yemen is right on its border. It's a vast strategic importance. Will the Saudis in 2026 say, okay, you know what? We're not going to allow this to even fester, because we saw what happened in Syria. It festered for a number of years. Assad had won, his allies had won, and then suddenly there was a turnaround. We're not going to allow that. I mean, is that a possibility? Under Mohammed's idea of like these four poles, and three of them don't want Israel now.
First, I want to say Happy New Year to Golnara. She's a very faithful viewer of ours. Hi, Golnara.
Thank you, Golnara.
Regarding what you said, Sharmin, I also agree, but still, what happened is so recent. Yeah. We want to see, and for instance, when Muhammad was talking, the thing that I was asking myself, he said, that that UAE will fall under Israel. You know what I mean?
It is. It's
Yeah,
100%.
100%. And that Qatar, مثلا, for instance, under Turkey, but for instance, what will happen with countries like Bahrain, like Egypt, like Jordan?
Saudi Arabia.
Saudi Arabia, 100%.
But for instance,
Yeah.
why I'm asking the question, because still Bahrain and UAE, they are the only two countries that didn't condemn the declaration of
Well, you know that the
Somaliland.
UAE did a military exercise with Bahrain just in the last few months.
Yeah, but
I
that's
remember
what I'm
noticing
thinking
that
about
and
this
thinking
stuff.
that was so odd. Are they trying to provoke the Saudis? You know, they're
No.
popping up in Pakistan. They're popping up in Saudi stomping grounds. This is very overtly threatening. This isn't just, something quietly happening. The Saudis are noting all of this and are getting very, very pissed off well before things erupted in Sudan and things erupted now in Yemen.
And I was asking myself also, why would the UAE risk it? You know what I mean? Because if Saudi Arabia just like declared war on social media, they will flood the UAE. And people, I saw many answers, many questions on our podcast saying they are both Sunnis, why they are fighting. First, there's
Because
ideologies.
this battle is all
Yeah.
about hegemony, and
Yeah,
they are all, mostly monarchies.
And there's a couple of questions on why the UAE backed down very fast. That's part of my answer is because Saudi Arabia, the influence of Saudi Arabia is huge. The UAE is nothing in the Arab world compared to Saudi Arabia.
Yeah.
They have the money, they have the resources, they have Mecca, they have Medina, they have intellectuals. Yani, you barely see anybody on the TV, for instance, from UAE, but Saudi Arabians are everywhere, even in even single Arab country. Like the ambassador of Saudi Arabia is known by everybody. You know what I mean?
I mean, and let's be honest, the UAE is a refugee state.
Sorry, Sharmin. First, also, Golden Sun has a question. I will put it now. Why would you? How could you characterize the precious metals sector in the Gulf region? I think we can write about this, but I don't think country we have like direct answer
Well,
for him.
precious metals, let's
we
just go
wrote-
straight to gold. Let's go straight to gold. The UAE is trying to take over the logistics, for gold in the Persian Gulf through to Africa in a very big way. It is a big reason for them being in Sudan, which is a big pipeline for its gold, but also in other African countries. The UAE is being very aggressive in countries or aggressively approaching countries in the African continent that,
But
mine heavy metals.
And also we have also
Tobin.
donation from Tobin. Thank you for continuing to do the good work. Thank you for listening
Okay.
to us every time.
Now, we completely forgot the trend of what we were talking
Yeah, sorry, but I just wanted to thank them because haram they are putting and we are missing them.
No, not haram.
Okay.
Really, we do thank you. But what were we talking about?
But I am afraid because sometimes Sharmin, it takes her 10 minutes to finish the sentence. So I'm afraid they will be upset because we didn't mention them.
We were talking about the Gulf countries because, I think that Bahrain, Kuwait, all countries of the GCC have a certain space of independence, but at the end of the day, they have to abide by Saudi Arabia's words. So I think Bahrain can have drills with the UAE. They cannot speak because after Somaliland and everything. But at the end of the road, when Saudi Arabia asks for something, all of them have to abide, except the UAE, which is trying to act as or to give itself a more independent space between in the relation with Saudi Arabia. So
one
I
of
think
yeah.
so not just this is what I think that the word is for Saudi Arabia at the end of the world in GCC.
So the Saudis have never let any contender take its, mantle, right? So when
No way.
when the Qataris were punching above their weight, the Saudis tried their best to nip them in the bud. But a country that seeks to carve out a serious position for itself, you can't just stop it like that. Qatar has the right to carve out a position for itself. The Emirates has the right to do that. The thing is, when it starts to try to steal the position of Persian Gulf hegemon away from the Saudis, and this is what we're seeing now. I just want to remind people, the Emirates is essentially a country of refugees, the way Israel is. All right.
Yes, and
And I mean, literally, the reason I say this is because you have the vast majority of its population are migrants from other countries. You know, they're called expats because they have money or they're white. This is usually how it goes. But they are refugees, people who are migrants. They've, sought refuge in X country because they perceive themselves to have a better future here. Do you know what would happen to the UAE if Dubai became insecure? Literally, all the Iranians, all the Indians, I'm talking about the middle and upper classes there, you know, the people who have a lot of businesses, the people who have like hundreds of thousands of those populations, the Russians, okay, remember what happened to the UAE when was it? Was it after 2007 and the stock market collapsed?
2008.
2008? I mean, they were empty apartments everywhere. The UAE is super vulnerable because in the same way that Qatar is, because Qatar is also a country full of migrants.
But UAE is 89%. The last study, they say there's only 1 million UAE citizens. Emiratis.
But in Qatar, it's the same. Qatar, it's like 300,000 Qataris.
But they don't have 9 million. First, before you continue, also thank you for Clifford Postria. Sorry if I butchered the name. He says the creators are winners. We know, thank you. And we have another donation from Tobin. Thank you for your, he's saying thank you for continuing to do the good work. Thank you also. Yeah, Sharmin. So we were talking about the expats. Yeah, I think this is very dangerous for the Gulf countries because any country, any Western country or any country, for instance, like India and Pakistan and Bangladesh, because there are more Bangladeshi and Indians and Pakistanis in the UAE, more than the UAE. This can make
the UAE will empty out. Israel will empty out two major migrant or refugee countries, right? They will empty out if there is major conflict and major insecurity within their borders. That is already happening in Israel. This is the second year in the row that there's been a net negative in terms of migration to Israel. And they're already saying Israel's population growth rate has shrunk to something, I can't remember, 0 point something percent, one of the lowest in the world. So these two countries are more vulnerable than anyone could think. If only their enemies could think about addressing this in the right way, you know? But go ahead, Mohammed. Wait, Mohammed was...
just very fast. Yeah, regarding.
Are you going to mention someone else who did
it? No. I would have said it. That's why they made a plan in Israel to like import Indians from the north of India. I think like 50 or 80,000 people to maintain the balance.
They just want slave labor.
Also,
yeah,
every time they want. Yeah, go ahead.
You know what? One of the smartest things that the UAE have done in the last couple of years was to establish this very strong link with Israel. What UAE did is that it knew that it has a small geography, it has a minimal political influence, it doesn't have the capabilities, and it has a very normal relations with the United States of America. And the main relation in the Gulf with the US is through Saudi Arabia. What the UAE did is that it raised its price by increasing the relation with Israel. That's why it's now, when a country wants to threaten the UAE, they feel that, or the UAE feels that, they are protected by Israel, number one, and the other countries, also Saudi Arabia, they think today twice before attacking the UAE because they know that now the UAE's price for Israel and the US is much higher than its price before. And I think that's why we are finding today much more cooperation between the UAE and Israel, because this is how the UAE feels that it's going to protect itself. It's going to give itself more political influence and a very bigger seat at the table with the United States.
But this isn't like a sudden decision. This is a very, very calculated decision that the UAE made, and we're going back to well before 2020. You know, we're talking about in the sort of early previous decade, where they were building up their mercenary armies and creating a blueprint for how the UAE can power project through these mercenary armies, a lot of Latin Americans in them, a lot of Colombians in particular, bringing in Eric Prince to sort of, create that blueprint for them the way he did Blackwater, showed that the UAE was planning a campaign. So they built this up very covertly, but very meaningfully and willfully. And one of the things the UAE did, not that long ago, okay, but well after their plans had been laid, was to champion the Abraham Accords. There would be no Abraham Accords if not for the UAE. That has to be clear. They literally were hand in hand with Jared Kushner working on the Abraham Accords, and then became really the beloved Gulf, poster child for the White House through, right? Even before that, in the administration before Trump's first term, in the Obama years, they were also, positioning themselves that way. To work side by side with Israel, they had to do so covertly. Now it's really backfired for them because of the genocide in Gaza. But let's look at why, if you guys don't mind me doing like a bit of a deep dive into why the UAE is... Okay, to explain, can you maybe get one of the maps ready, the sort of larger region, from the Gulf to the Levant? Okay.
Yeah, they are ready. And for instance, we have...
Okay, put that one up so that I can see
I
it.
will put a map that includes BRI and other stuff, so we can see the importance of the region.
Okay. All right, that's helpful somewhat.
And there's
okay.
this one also.
So wait. So this one, I wanted to look at it a bit closer. So here's what the competition, the route competition is essentially between the Saudis and the Emiratis. They kind of have two different ways of looking at this. The UAE, the Saudis, for instance, have the largest contiguous border with the Persian Gulf of any of the Arab Persian Gulf states. Iran has the largest contiguous border of any of the states, and all of them combined. But the Saudis have the biggest contiguous border with the Persian Gulf of the Arab Persian Gulf states, all right? Now, the way Riyadh would like to, understandably, like to never have to feel threatened by a closure of the Strait of Hormuz again, right? And so for them, it would be really nice not to use the Persian Gulf, to use its own, the fact is Riyadh, if you can look on this map, connects to the Levant directly by land, all right? The Emirates, not so at all. The Emirates needs the water routes. Can you see that on this map, okay? Because it's very important to understand this before I sort of plunge into the next part. Riyadh can go, all right, can pump its gas and take it via land entirely to the Mediterranean, all right?
Yeah,
and to do this, it needs only Jordan, all right, Syria, Lebanon. That's all it needs. Doesn't need to mess with Turkey. It doesn't need to mess with Iran. It doesn't need to even deal with Israel. All right.
They already have pumps near Jeddah on the Red Sea. Yani also, if something happened, they are ready. And what happened in Hadramaut, just to show us, because also they have a project to pump oil from inside Saudi Arabia to ports of Hadramaut in Yemen. So they have 3 access to export their oil and gas through sea.
Who are you talking about? The Saudis?
Saudi Arabia.
Okay. So, well, everyone has ports, everyone has land routes, everyone has these things. But I'm saying for Saudi Arabia, it is the biggest landmass between the Persian Gulf and the Mediterranean. And fortunately for Saudi Arabia, you can see why it's going in heavy with, or taking the lead of Arab countries, I think, with the post-Assad Syria. Right, and of course, it's always had the been the Sunni country with the most clout in Lebanon, right? So it has that natural route. If you want to escape the Strait of Hormuz potential chokehold, this is the way to do it. The Emiratis cannot, which is why the Emiratis have been moving very strategically to buy ports or capture them, okay? Because the Emiratis need the sea route, and they will need to go around Yemen, all right, through to Israel that way. Because the Saudis aren't going to let the Emiratis just traipse across their desert. Nope, no way. So this is what the fight is about. Now, the Emiratis, and this we'll probably see more of, would like to stop Syria, would like to stop Saudi from having the dominant route. The Emiratis would be very happy with Israel, bombing Lebanon and closing off that route. Would be very happy with breaking up Syria, fracturing Syria in the way Israel wants, exactly the same way, to stop the Saudi project. You get what I'm saying? This is existential now, this fight between these two. It is not like who's the big boss. It is about these routes. All right, the Emiratis would like to stop the Saudis from having the routes, and now the Saudis would like to cut off the Emirates' legs because, in the south of Yemen. So I think this suggests that the big fight is going to be in Yemen between these two. And if Saudi Arabia doesn't take the lead, it will allow and just kill it right there. Basically kill the entire STC project in the south of Yemen. All right, just absolutely, massacre it. It will give the Israelis time to come in and create,
هلا they already took a very huge blow يعني the Emiratis in
Well,
Yemen.
they what happened now? You mean just, we're going to leave? The third time they've said they're going to leave in the last decade?
Good one, Sharmeen.
Thank you. Right. So by the way, the Emiratis saying they're going to leave when the Saudis bombed, this port of theirs. They just said their forces, Emirati forces, would leave. Doesn't mean the Emiratis work through proxies because they don't have enough Emiratis, right? They have migrants and refugees mostly. But so they're basically what they will work through their proxies, the STC, and the STC will be working with the Israelis in no time. So look at this map that Karim lovingly put up. You can see, the starred areas are UAE bases and ports that have just boom flourished. Okay, what did the UAE have before this? What did they have before this? All right, they were on the other side. They're on the other side of this map, okay, on the right side and up higher. Yeah. What did they have? They didn't have a string of pearls, right? They had nothing. Now look at them. Socotra, that little island that, we have Israeli military boots on the ground with the Emiratis there, from reports we've heard over the last few years, all right? So that's over to your right, that tiny little island. And then, this is you see the ports all along the Gulf of Aden and into the Red Sea. This is what the Saudis, if they did this right, if they made a deal with Ansar Allah, they should make. This is the way to get rid of the UAE. You make a deal with Ansar Allah. You put, because the Saudis technically run the officially internationally recognized government of Yemen. The government in Sana'a run by, who are these guys? We forget because they're so not mentioned. The what are they called?
The PLC, if I'm not mistaken.
PLC, yeah, but Presidential Leadership Council, okay? These are the guys who are sitting in Saudi hotel rooms, forever and basically running Yemen. They're the ones that the UN Security Council recognizes. But nobody hears about the PLC anymore because they've really been marginalized. The Saudis, Mohammed bin Salman has really not been interested in Yemen for quite a while, but his alarm has grown with what he's seeing visibly, that Yemen looks like it's going to be split in two. He's not having that, and he's not having the UAE. So the UAE basically, and its proxies, now more or less control 80% of the landmass of Yemen. But 80% of the population of Yemen is in the northern part, which is Ansar Allah controlled, okay? But controlling geographically 80% of the country means you're also going to be having access to the natural resources. So for the viewer who asked about what about, mineral resources or metal resources in this region, the UAE is going for these resources. Don't also forget that when they besieged Qatar, we got information through the leaked Emirati ambassador in Washington's emails that they really wanted to invade Qatar and take over its massive gas fields, right? Which is maybe third or fourth in the world, the Qatari gas fields. Anyways, so that's basically my point. And here's the time for the Saudis. If they don't move very quickly and they don't work with Iran and Ansar Allah to sort this out, okay, the UAE and the Israelis are going to be in there. The Israelis now have urgent reason to want to support the Emirati project in Yemen because, to their dismay, a new, very strong, uber strong member of the Axis of Resistance emerged since October 7th, and that was Ansar Allah, which bombed Israel throughout Israel's genocide in Gaza. Okay, and so now the Israelis have gone full on. The Cradle has reported on how they're trying to infiltrate through telecommunications and other devices. The Yemeni resistance movement, the Ansar Allah movement, etc. We've seen assassinations of the entire governing officials of Yemen this year, right, by the Israelis, bombing of ports, etc. But now they really want the UAE project to work. They would like to be right at the border of the area that Ansar Allah runs, the small part of Yemen where 80% of the population resides. And so this is, I think 2026 is going to bring a colossal fight over Yemen, but I think it could be nipped in the bud with a Saudi-Iranian resolution of the matter. I'm sure China would be happy to broker it. I'm sure Russia would be happy to broker it as well. Even Turkey and other players in the region, because the Emiratis are, as you say, rightfully, Mohammed, they are this fourth new prong in this region with the Israelis that the other three absolutely, have reason to consider their number one adversaries now.
So, Muhammad, what do you think 2026 will be better for the region than 2025?
No, I think one of the main things that we should take into consideration in 2026 is that many main powers in the region consider this year to be an existential year. Mainly, Israel is facing an existential threat. That's why it's trying to end its enemies. So it's not trying to control them, but it needs to end them at all. Saudi Arabia also feels that the region is going towards Israel and all its influence in the region is going to diminish. So it's an existential threat for its influence to Turkey. Or for sure sees this year as an existential year because for Israel, Turkey is one of the most main threats in this year. And if you read what Israelis are writing, they are saying that, we got rid of Iran from our borders, but Turkey is not a better country on our borders. So for Turkey, it's also an existential year. For Iran, too, it's an existential year. So I think this feeling of threat, existential threat, is the main driver of policies and decisions in 2026. And that's why we are going to see a very high level of competition. Part of it may be a military part, but the main part of it is political and economic.
Yeah, 100%. But I would like to also, note that while everyone, the big fights are being viewed as existential for players in this region, that is the sentiment of all big players around the world. Many countries, the hegemons of yesteryear, the unipolar world, are viewing this year as existential for them. The decisions that are made, in the Ukraine, right, with Russia, what's going to happen over the resolution of that conflict? Or will it pour into Europe? Will they go to war against Russia? What's happening in Taiwan? I mean, Taiwan, today I was thinking, Taiwan is the same thing as Somaliland. It is the same thing. It is a, unilateral declaration of a state that is recognized by nobody, but Taiwan, because of the length of time it's been around, kind of like Israel, right, has managed to position itself economically in a way, produce things that others don't, that makes it a player. So people do business with it, right, even if they don't recognize it. Somaliland is the same way. Somaliland, who's going to play with Somaliland? No African country will accept this because Somalia is the country, right? And Somalia will not accept a breaking up of its state. I do think those two are very similar, and the Israelis are, by going into Somaliland in the way they are, by recognizing it. The UAE already has a military base in there and has poured a lot of money into that. See, the UAE has paved the way. This is why I'm saying to you folks, the UAE and Israel have been at this for a very long time. Okay, at least 5 years ago when the Abraham Accords were struck, right? But well before that, the ground was being laid for the Abraham's Accord. This has been going on for a very long time. Now we're just seeing it. So imagine that Somaliland will now become a fault line for conflict, just as Taiwan has been built up as a fault line for conflict, just as Venezuela is being built up as a fault line for conflict, just as Greenland potentially is going to be built up as a fault line for conflict. These are conflicts that don't need to be had. You know, in my view, what China launched a BRI, right? It's BRI. Was to actually connect the world, connect its world with the worlds next to it, right? Because economy, because prosperity, because growth, because development. It wasn't an insidious thing. Of course, its adversaries viewed it as insidious because it was Chinese driven, but actually everybody owns more or less the roads and the structures and the railroad lines and the ports that the Chinese build out. And the Chinese can't do this throughout Asia and Europe. Others are participating. You know, money is coming from everywhere. And as the project has grown, more people have participated. This is what I cannot stand about the so-called moderate Arabs. They have the zero-sum mentality of the unipolar world, of the bloody Americans and the bloody Europeans. If we can't both win, we cannot both win. One of us has to win. This is the wrong attitude. There are many routes, okay, that can be built. The UAE can build a route to the Mediterranean. The Saudis can build a route to the Mediterranean. The Iranians can build one. There will be different traffic coming from all these areas. Okay, the main arteries from Eastern Asia to Eastern Europe, okay, will be built by all, and then maybe primarily by the Chinese and the countries it partners with. Right? And the Chinese route is kind of basic. It goes through northern Iran. It wants to ideally go through Turkey. It's the shortest route to Europe. But the Turks aren't really playing ball exactly. And the Iranians are. But here's the thing. That's the main artery for China. From there, you have Iran, India, and Russia building a north-south corridor, right? The INSTIC, the international, what? International North-South Transportation Corridor, right? So here's the horizontal line that China's, mapped out. Here's a vertical line, but there are multiple vertical lines. The Turks are investing heavily in routes through Iraq. The Iraqi dam project, the Iraqi railway, the Iraqi roadways. Everyone can do this. Everyone benefits. What is this horrible zero-sum attitude of some of these Gulf monarchies? It is so detrimental. You can have your route through Syria. You can also have your route through the Red Sea. You can have them all, and everyone can have ownership. And this is how you develop without conflict. I want these leaders to go because of their mentality in order, this old Saudi mentality. Karim, you taught us about this. You taught me about this a few years ago. The Saudis have, from their founding father, Al Saud, they have this quote that for Saudi Arabia to thrive, Yemen must remain poor, because the opposite will also be, the flip side of it is the opposite. If Yemen is wealthy, Saudi Arabia will be depleted. I don't know where he came to that conclusion, but this is the zero-sum thinking that is taking this region down. And I actually think, I don't know if you agree with me, Mohammed, or not, that this is an opportunity. If the Saudis move now, okay, like right now, sit with Iran, sit with Ansar Allah, sit with like some third parties, the Chinese, the Russians, etc., okay, and hammer out a deal, because Mohammed bin Salman now has Trump's ears. We all know this. We all talked about this the last few months, right? Wowee. You know, the Saudis are back in good graces in the White House. He has an opportunity to push through a deal that push out the Emiratis, that absolutely push them out, and that means Israel's gone from that scenario. And the port scenario is also gone. Because you can have the Saudis run the ports with the Yemeni government. You know, you can have a consortium, even better, that's win-win for multiple countries. Maybe the Chinese, because they have the infrastructure and the know-how, can run these ports. This is a solution that could be had in 2026, but if Riyadh does not move right away and gives the Israeli space to mess up this deal, and the Americans to mess up this deal, and the British to mess up this deal will be messed up, and Yemen will be in conflict for the next 5 years.
Yes, I do agree that Saudi Arabia has to take certain steps in the region, and I think Mohammed bin Salman is now convinced that he needs to take such steps. But I think also he thinks about the costs of these steps, because he do know that at the end of the road, it's the Americans that are keeping him in power inside of Saudi Arabia, number one, and number two, and I do think that the Americans are benefiting from this competition in the region. They just want to control it and not stop it. It's how they work. They pull out strings and they control their allies to keep the competition to a certain level. And I don't think that the Americans want to just for Saudi Arabia to be the number one GCC country. I think also the United States is benefiting from this UAE Saudi Arabia competition, but they don't need it to reach a phase that it reached in Yemen today. And that's the problem. It's that competition is moving very fast as we spoke, and now it's becoming a trend in the new year. And when it moves in this speed, the US will face a problem in controlling it. So unless the United States will be convinced that it needs to act to control its allies first before controlling its enemies, control its allies to make sure that the competition is under a certain limit. And I think that's one of the main things that is being discussed between Trump and Netanyahu. I am not convinced that Trump wants Israeli control of the region. I think that Trump's main view for the region is some kind of cooperation between several countries. Mainly, Israel has a certain role, Saudi Arabia has a certain role, the UAE has a certain role, Egypt has a certain role, Turkey has a certain role. I think this is the best scenario for the US. When you have a lot of allies acting in the region, then you are distributing the tasks, then you are able to control every task by one ally, then you can see then no one ally will have a leverage over you in the near future. I think this is how the US wants to view the region, and I think this is one of the problems between Netanyahu and Trump.
I honestly, I mean, I agree with you generally, but don't forget in the U.S., they're in a big conflict as well, okay? MAGA is being divided, so between the Israel firsters and the America firsters, right? And so I think you'll have two elements. I do believe that Trump ultimately wants to make money, okay? And he keeps talking about, let's have development, let's build buildings, let's build cities, right? The Saudi offering is to bring peace to the region, kick the UAE out, and we will work this area. I will bring a solution, and you can build up Yemen, because Yemen's been destroyed. Let's get some American contracts in there, okay? I don't know, but I'm saying it's not opposed to Trump's vision. Now you have the Israel firsters in the U.S. who try to sabotage every single bit of this. We also have to see how the U.S. MAGA civil war will play out in order to see who will be victorious. Right now, it looks like the Israel firsters are going to lose. Okay, I mean, I don't know, Mohammed. I've become obsessed recently about watching Candace and Tucker versus Ben and Mark and whatever. It's incredible. It's a meltdown, and actually, even in America now, the veils are dropping massively. So I agree that everyone wants to move, but there's so much disarray. So I do think if the Saudis do this smartly, work with the Iranians, bring in Russia, China, other players that the US is more friendly with, we can have a solution. But then I think if there is resolution there, this shit's just going to move to the Caucasus. I also have in 2026 my eyes on Aliyev and Azerbaijan. You know, Turkey may be playing a better game suddenly in the region because it's being boxed out by the Israelis, who the Turks have no problems with, let's be honest. You know, they'd be friends with them tomorrow and do business with them tomorrow. They're just stupidly, Israel has boxed Turkey out, right? And so Turkey, you know, well, Turkey becomes an asset here for us you know, what is it called? You know, non-conflict people in this region. But I think what's going to happen in the Caucasus is going to be I think that's where the Americans are going to play, where Trump isn't thinking about development and stuff, because he's then moving. And this is where, when they say move east, you know, pivot to China, right? This is where the Caucasus lies, between our region, right, and China and Russia, right? This is where I think the American deep state will be playing heavily, and we will see some of this in 2026. And Karim is now showing the t-shirts because we want our viewers, please weigh in. Which is your favorite? Okay, you can message us if you're Patreons privately. You can put it in our live chat. You can put it in the comments below the video. We want to know. We will only be saving one of these t-shirts. And in the future, other than our normal Cradle logo stock, we will be doing more interesting ones that have some political or civilizational or cultural features on them that we hope you will want to buy. So please vote now, or weigh in rather. And yeah, Mohammed, I don't know if you want to respond to what I was saying.
I just want to thank Clifford also. He donated and said the cradle is iconic. Nothing is like it, the first of its kind. Thank you.
I think, yes, one of the main things that we have to follow up in 2026 is the competition inside of the United States of America and inside of Trump's administration. You know, but I think today it's still the make Israel great again, or not great again, but to just follow Israel's interests is the main driver in Trump's administration. The MLGA, the MAGA, Make Great Again axis, is pressuring Trump towards slowing his steps supporting Israel, but he's still giving Israel all it wants, and he is still giving Netanyahu all he wants to a certain limit. He put some limits over Netanyahu, but I think the Israeli axis inside the administration is still the one controlling Trump's decisions,
Yes.
number one. Yeah, and number two, I think that in the next years in Trump's administration, we are going to see a very fierce competition between the MAGA axis and the Israeli axis. And this will be something unprecedented inside of the US, and it's something worth viewing. I'm not saying that the United States of America will not continue to be the number one country supporting Israel and giving all at once. But what I'm saying is that it won't become the most important factor for American foreign policy. What will become for American foreign policy is the American interests, and which do not abide all the time with the Israeli ones. And that's why Netanyahu is feeling threatened. That's why he is feeling afraid. And I think that's why he feels that Trump's current administration is the last American administration that's going to give him all he wants. the next administration won't be as fulfilling as this one. That's why he is speaking about the necessity to change the regime inside of Iran during Trump's administration. That's why he wants to get rid of Hamas during Trump's administration. That's why he wants to end Hezbollah during Trump's administration, because he feels that after Trump leaves the White House, the window of opportunity will just become narrower and narrower, because the main voices inside the US will become the MAGA voices, the ones that follow the American interests, that may or may not abide with the Israeli interests.
I mean, it's already happened. I think the majority of America doesn't support Israel anymore. The issue, and as you correctly point out, is that is not the case in the halls of power yet. Okay, so we have to wait for that to happen. I think, as a result of our conversation, the word for us for 2026 is existential. Everybody is feeling an existential pain and acting, I think, sometimes in a knee-jerk way, sometimes in a calculated way, but acting in a very urgent way. And this is a recipe for disaster and conflict. But I would like to ask you, because I think we should mention, and I expected this to be a point of discussion, what's happening in Iran now. Now, I just want to say my prediction for 2026 is that we are likely to see regime change in the US or in Israel more than we're likely to see regime change in Iran. I mean, they sure as hell try, but I don't, this is the first time we are seeing regular Iranians yelling at people who are trying to infiltrate their protests, or legitimate protests about how badly the Pezeshkian government has run the Iranian economy, okay, and collapsed their currency.
Yalla, 1 second. Yalla. Welcome back, Muhammad. Yalla.
Yes, thank you.
He just dropped Bashar Assad on us.
Oh, he did. So what I was saying, Mohammed, is I'm predicting that, with all the efforts now being put into Iran and taking legitimate protests about the economy, and trying to convert them into something else, and then the Israeli and American official accounts just driving so much attention to economic protests. They have protests in their countries all the time. How many 100,000 people marches have we seen in Tel Aviv in the last year alone? And they're trying to drive, but in Iran, after the 12-day war in June this year, or last year, we saw a complete switcheroo. And this is where the Israelis not only failed, they gave their adversary, their greatest adversary in the region, a huge boost of power. Iranians started to see, through the curtains, right? They started to understand fully that subversion is what, that Israel is the enemy, number one, that Israel is the enemy, and the United States is behind Israel, that there's no point for negotiations with a beast that attacked it during negotiations, very sneaky, but that also anything they have to say is immediately going to be subverted. So we have so many videos now of people protesting, for the massive inflation in Iran right now, and the drop in the Iranian currency, and then others try to bring in other issues, and they're yelled down by the protesters. And so I don't know if this is true. I haven't checked it, Karim, but apparently there was an attack yesterday on an Iranian IRGC facility, and I just vaguely saw this, and some Iranian security forces were killed. I don't know if that's true, but everybody in Iran knows that this was a subversion, okay? And this is unique. I've been talking to people in Tehran the last 2 days, and everyone's saying the major difference is we are so much smarter than we were, in the last 15 years. So, I do expect regime change in Tel Aviv and in Washington sooner than I do in Iran.
Hopefully.
Well, I don't know about faster or not, but yes, I do think that the Iranians are being targeted by a very strong cognitive warfare just increasing the situation inside of Iran. And I think it's now well known that the Israelis are trying to encourage and persuade people to just go to the streets inside of Iran. And I think what they are doing is that they are giving much more weight for any small, negligible news inside of Iran. And let us remember that the main Israeli American goal in Iran isn't the ballistic missiles, isn't the nuclear proliferation.
What happened?
And Israeli believe that if they end the ballistic missiles, if they end the nuclear facilities, but the regime is still the same, then they will build this power again. But if they change the regime, then they can do like they did in Syria, destroy everything, control the land, and do whatever they want. And that's why I think in the next year we are going to see many times the Americans and Israelis trying to work with the Iranian people, persuading them to go to the streets, pressuring them on the economic level, pressuring them on the cognitive level.
I honestly think right now, I have to say, it's awful watching this. First of all, there's inflation everywhere. People are being priced out of basic goods,
True.
milk, bread, eggs, everywhere. Can you believe how expensive things are in Beirut? It's ridiculous. We saw during the financial crisis how cheap things could be, didn't we, right?
Yes.
And now we see that they've quadrupled the price of things just because they can. It's just how it works here. It's very exploitative. But in Iran, it is bad economic policy as well as sanctions in this case. I mean, the Pezeshkian government has just been a huge letdown. I really think that started around the time of the war, and I don't think anyone, I don't know what his popularity ratings are in Iran, but sorry, they can't be very high. Because he effed up on security, he effed up on diplomacy. The comments he made were so cringe, like when he was visiting Azerbaijan and stuff, right? Like an idiot being played. He doesn't understand foreign policy, he doesn't understand economic policy. These reformists, so-called reformists in Iran are, into liberal economics. That's it. The thing that's failed around the world, they're now trying to implement. It's just dumb, I mean, this is the problem. This isn't going to go away. Are we going to have 3 more years of Pezeshkian, or is there going to be something? Because the
we've
thing
said
is,
it before, since he's also here, Iran should completely ditch the West and go East. But till now,
it's
there's
not
people
that. It's
they
like,
don't want to do it.
For me, having Pezeshkian become elected at the same time you had Xi Jinping in power and you had Vladimir Putin in power was a massive letdown. A massive letdown. Like a hole in the puzzle, and how many more years of him? 3 more years? It's awful. You guys are decrying, 3 more years of Trump. Pezeshkian, man. I don't know where you go, where Iran goes from that. I mean, really, I think, the supreme leader doesn't interfere in governance, but economics is a national security issue, especially at a time like this, where everyone's rushing for the brass ring, right, to knock out their competitors in the region. And I think there needs to be an economic plan that's pushed down from above and bypasses this idiot.
Sure, Swaidan, do you have any comment regarding?
He's just more polite than I am.
To be honest, I don't know about the economic factors. I'm not an economist, so I can't really say my point about whether he is doing right or bad in economics. But what I do know is that, yes, Iran has some problems regarding foreign policy, regarding leveraging its powers, regarding playing in the cognitive field. It can be much better than it is today. And I don't think that neither Qatar nor KSA nor UAE have smarter brains to work in the cognitive field, for example. Iran has one of the most important universities in the region and maybe in the world, and it has the resources needed. So yes, I do agree that in certain fields, Iran can be much better than it is today. And I think this is why the supreme leader is always speaking about development, about the role of the people, of the people in power, to just develop the country, to learn, to take advantage of the chances. And I think that in 2026, or I think that after the 12-day war in 2025, the Iranians feel much more threat, and this drove them to just take things more seriously. And I think in 2026, the Iranians are going to take things more seriously. They are going to try to solve so many issues because, as we said before, it is an existential year for many
Mm,
countries. When your existence is threatened, you don't have the space to just try. You need to be very strict in your decisions, and you need to make sure that your decisions are 110% right. And I think that we will see a certain difference in Iranian policies and Iranian actions in the region in the new year.
Hopefully.
no, I agree with you, and I think, well said. We should wrap up it now. We've gone longer than usual.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah,
want
I
to
just want to
remind you.
comment over this because it's very
Yeah,
important. Because if this happens in Iran, it will not only happen in Iran, it will reflect positively in factions in Iraq, in Yemen, and in Lebanon,
100%.
elsewhere.
An Israeli Emirati dream.
Yeah,
Yeah.
100%. Yeah, what you were saying?
No, I was going to wrap it up actually. I was going to
Wrap
say
it up.
thank you, Mohammed and Kareem, for a very enjoyable and long podcast on this first day of the new year of 2026. Like I said when we started the show, we're going to be bringing you a lot more visual content through an interview show that we're going to launch in January with new kinds of people that one doesn't oftentimes hear from, but who we think have really have something important to say and to add to the conversation. Please follow us on our social media, on Instagram, on Twitter, on Telegram, TikTok, Rumble, and please become a Patreon. We have to reach 600 more Patreons by January 24th, which is my birthday. Okay, so please step up if you haven't already. It's not a joke. Like, we love what we do and we're happy to do it. But it's awful having to do it with difficulty. When absolute, dimwits who call themselves journalists, get like charge accounts from their companies, right? We have electricity problems, guys. But we're not complaining. We just want to be self-sufficient, which means having worked at this 4 years, when we hit 1 million readers a month, we thought, wow, if we only had the tiniest 0.5%?
I think so.
0.5 of 1% of our readers become donors, we become self-sufficient. So even if you've never done this before, and I'm not a Patreon for anyone, by the way, so I know how hard it is to make that leap into supporting things when so many interesting things are out there that are calling for your, precious money, and you'd like to do all, and you like to read them all, but you don't want to do it because it's hard, and who would you choose? The Cradle really, really, really needs your support. No kidding. We want to be around 1 year from now and having the same podcast for you guys with way more content in 2027. But it means it means that, you need to become a contributor. To
Khalas,
this.
please
you need
come
to become
again.
our backbone. Please. No, I'm just saying because I don't think we never asked for money before the end of
I know.
last year. And it's because we never even had like ads on our site to donate. We just had a little support thing because it's embarrassing for us, right? It's
Yeah.
not very dignified, but it is essential to new media. And I think Western independent media does it so much better because they go out and ask. They run campaigns. We don't really know how to do that. please become a Patreon, especially if you're not a Patreon to anyone else, okay? And you've never done it before. The Cradle needs you. We're going to see you in 2026. And next podcast is on Monday. Esteban will be back. Mohammed Swaidan, thank you as always for bringing us perspective. I just want to say quickly, maybe you can take us out with this. December 31st was yesterday. That was the deadline the Americans and Israelis set for Lebanon. Give us in a sentence or two what you think is happening or why nothing has happened.
No, I think the story is clear for everyone. Hezbollah will not give up its weapons. The Americans want the weapons, but on the long term, they don't want conflict inside of Lebanon. Regarding this topic, the Israelis want the weapons no matter what the cost is. The Lebanese government want the weapons, but we're not willing to pay the cost. And because we have these four players, Hezbollah, the Lebanese government, Israel, and the United States, and every one of them has a different point of view, this matter till now, there's no answer for it. What is sure is that Hezbollah's weapons will always be in their hands, no matter what the costs is. And unless and until the Israelis are convinced in this, then we will always move in the same sphere of escalation till the whole world is convinced that resistance will continue with its weapons inside of Lebanon.
But most importantly, I'm thinking
Support us.
per your own description of the fourth axis that is developed in this region today. No other country except the UAE and Israel care to have Lebanon attacked again. That wasn't the case even earlier this year or in the fall. And for the first time, the Saudis may step in, and the Turks, to stop this happening in Lebanon. And you need to write, by the way, I think your next feature, your next column needs to be on your four axes, because I think it's very well explained.
I was thinking
okay,
about
guys. Smash that like button and become a Patreon, and we will see you on Monday. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
The Cradle exists because the world does not need another mouthpiece. It needs a mirror and sometimes a megaphone. We report from West Asia, from inside the region, not from Washington, Tel Aviv, or London. We're fiercely independent, no government directives, no corporate backing, no editorial leash. We publish the story that legacy media buries, and we do it at great risk. Our reporting unsettles the powerful, exposes contradictions, and gives voice to the silenced. But independence is not free. If you believe West Asia deserves to shape its own narratives, now is the time to act. Click the button, contribute, keep the Cradle independent, and let us do the legwork for you.